Welcome to Valley Brook Church, where our mission is to know and share the life-changing love of God. It is our prayer that this message helps you on your spiritual journey. We encourage you to join us on Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube. This will help you stay up to date with opportunities to connect with others, grow in your faith, serve, and go make disciples. You can also send prayer requests and sign up for our events on our connection form at valleybrookchurch.org/connect. And now it's time for today's message.
So years leading up to 2020, I know you want to block 2020 from your mind, but years leading up to 2020, I have to admit to you, I was really excited and geeking out. Because in the eyesight world, what is 2020? It's perfect vision, right? And so I was just so excited to be able to present leadership vision for Valley Brook that was, for the year 2020. I was so excited about it, right? And of course, when 2020 came, and unless you were underneath a rock that year, we realized that there was nothing clear about 2020. There was nothing that we could see at all. We couldn't see it clearly. And it started out with the massive wildfires in Australia. Remember that, right? And then and Kobe Bryant dying tragically, and then we learned the word COVID, and masks and stores and schools closing, toilet paper shortage. I was looking through my photos, and really looking, and there it was there at Target, all empty. And protest riots and a very divisive election. And who can remember, who could forget, really, the murder hornets? Remember the murder hornets? Yeah. To commemorate the year, and you might think that this is really silly or really stupid of me, but to commemorate the year and to remember it, I signed up for a virtual 10K run. Virtual because everything was virtual that year. But it was a 10K run that was highlighting all the things from 2020, and they sent me this really cool medal that I earned. It's virtual. They don't know I ran it, but they sent it anyway when I gave them my money, and so it's got. What I love about this medal, it's got everything on there. It's got the Australian wildfires, and it's got sorry we're closed. It's got the election. It's got toilet paper, and even the murder hornets are on there. But one of my favorite things about this whole medal is on the back, it gives a review, a 1-star review for the year 2020. 1 out of 5. That's what it got. And, with all the uncertainty and chaos and confusion that ensued over the last couple of years, I had a lot of people come and ask, are these the end times? I had people in the church, I had friends outside the church asking me, are these the end times? Is that, what does all this mean as all this is coming down? And so it was a very common question for people to be asking over the last couple of years to me and to some of the staff. And I thought, well, it's nothing like a little crazy to be thrown into our culture to get us thinking about what's next, right? What does this all have to do with us? And so our summer series that we've been going through is Revelation. It's taking us through the last book of the Bible. It's the very last book, which just kind of puts an exclamation point on all the books written before it in the Bible. But this book will help us understand or answer some of those questions. Are these the end times? What does this look like? But I want to reassure you again, we've said this multiple times throughout the series, that most importantly, what the book of Revelation means, it can really be summed up in 2 words, is what? Jesus wins. Regardless of all the stuff we've been going through, we don't need to be afraid. We don't need to be afraid whatsoever because Jesus wins. And it's really, really good that he wins because he's good. Jesus is good. His purposes are the best. We sang it just a little bit ago. His purposes are the best for us. And so it's really good that he wins. It's really good that he wins because he's loving. Do you know no one else loves you as much as Jesus loves you? Not even, and you love yourself a lot. I know because I love myself a lot, but Jesus loves me more than I love me, and he loves you more than you love you. And so it's really good that he wins because he's loving in this as well. It's also good that he wins because he's powerful. No one has authority to match his. We saw that as exampled in his life when he was here. He had authority over demons and disease and death itself. And so nobody can match his authority, so it's good that he wins. So as we cover these more complex and intense topics over the next today and over the next couple weeks, I want you to remember that no matter what happens in life, we have hope because he's in control. There's a couple ways that you can approach reading the book of Revelation, is that either you can become oh my and start prepping and saving up because you know what, the end of the world is coming, or you can rest assured and be at peace and sleep well at night knowing that he's in control. That's the hope you can have. And so that's why I'm so excited about going through this book this summer with y'all. As we go through these sections today and the next couple weeks, again, it gets a little hairier in the book of Revelation. I want you to consider these important questions. These questions right here. Who is God to you, and where do you stand with him? Who is God to you, and where do you stand with him? So as we're going through some of this, I want you to consider that. All right, so Jesus' disciples, Jesus hanging with his disciples before he's going to go to the cross, and they ask him this question. He says, Jesus, hey, you talked all this, that you're going away and you're going to do these things. Your kingdom is coming. Will you clue us in? When are you coming back? That's a good question. Like if you could ask Jesus a question, what would you ask him, right? His disciples ask him, when are you coming back, Jesus? What's the end of the world going to look like? What should we expect to see as it's coming? Fair question, right? Jesus answers that question himself in Matthew 24. And I want to read that before we get into Revelation 6 and 7. I know you're like, we're the series on Revelation, but we'll get there. But I want to show you in Matthew 24 how he answers this question, because it outlines what we're going to find today in Revelation 6 and 7. Jesus answers the question, when are we coming back? How's this? What should we expect? In Matthew 24, in verse 5, he first says, see to it that no one leads you astray. There's going to be deceivers. There are going to be people that are going to lead you off the track, but see to it that you are not led astray. And then verse 5, for many will come in my name saying, I am the Christ, I am the Messiah, I am the Savior, follow me, and they will lead many astray. And you're going to hear of wars and rumor of wars. See that you are not alarmed, for this must take place, but the end is not yet. For nation will rise against nation and kingdom against kingdom, and there will be famines and earthquakes in various places. All these are but the beginning of the birth pains. Oh, geez. Come on, couldn't that be the end of it? Really? He's just saying, well, it's just beginning. Then they'll deliver you up to tribulation and put you to death, and you will be hated by all nations for my name's sake. But get this, how he wraps this up. The one who endures to the end will be, what's the word? Saved. The one who endures to the end will be saved. Get this, this gospel of the kingdom. Whose kingdom? Jesus' kingdom. The gospel, good news. The good news of Jesus' kingdom will be proclaimed throughout the whole world as a testimony to all nations, and then the end will come. And somebody should say amen right there. You had an opportunity. The gospel will be shared to the end of the world. And at the end of Matthew, when Jesus, right before he ascends, he says, go make disciples of all nations, baptizing them and teaching them, right? And he says, but I will be with you to the very end of the age. That again, there's the hope that we have. Jesus is not dead, he's with us. So Jesus tells his disciples, in fact, in my Bible, it's red lettered in these words. Jesus tells us that before he comes back, the gospel first needs to be proclaimed throughout the entire world. And sorry to tell you, but things are going to get worse before they're going to get better. There's going to be deceptive leaders. They're going to lead you astray. Lead the world astray. There's going to be wars. There's going to be rumors of wars. There's going to be famines. There's going to be earthquakes. It's just the beginning of birth pains. Just the beginning. But don't worry, he says, but the gospel has to be proclaimed to all nations. Christians, followers of Christ, those of you who've said yes to Jesus and given your life, we don't need to fear when we hear all the calamity. We don't need to be shaken because God always provides, doesn't he always provide? He always provides whatever is needed when he calls us through it, right? Nobody has seen, nobody here can testify to that God always provides when he calls us through it. Have you seen God provide for you in ways that you would only count God to do it? When he's given you the strength to endure, when he's given you the prayers to pray, when he's provided the resources that are needed to get through it. Jesus has given his disciples hope here to say, you don't need to be afraid because whenever God calls you through it, and if he calls us through trials and tribulation and difficulty and circumstances, whatever it is, he always provides what we're going to need. He's Jireh, the provider, right? Okay, now you're starting to get on task here. All right. I want you to be in agreement because that's what the Bible says. He provides. Whatever we need, he always provides. So I want you to remember that. Now, interesting, and again, as I said, Jesus in his answer to his disciples here in Matthew 24 becomes an outline then for Revelation 6 and so on. And which is no surprise to us because Revelation, as we talked about a couple weeks ago, is filled with references from the other 65 books of the Bible. It's filled with them. And so it should not surprise us that as John is getting this vision of what it's going to look like, he's not only recalling Jesus' words when he was there listening to him, but also what was testified long before with Daniel and Ezekiel, Jeremiah, throughout all of the Bible. It's all going to be there. So, if you got your Bibles, Revelation 6, verse 1. Here we jump in. Revelation 6, verse 1. Now I watched when the Lamb opened one of the 7 seals, and I heard one of the 4 living creatures say with a voice like thunder, "Come." And I looked, and behold, a white horse, and its rider had a bow, and a crown was given to him, and he came out conquering and to conquer. So the scroll, what is that? We last couple weeks been looking at. The scroll is the title deed to earth. It's the title deed to the kingdom that Jesus rightfully earned through his sacrifice. And he's the only one worthy to open it. We covered that last week with Pastor Tim. And he's the only one able to open it. He begins to open it. He opens the first seal on this scroll as it's being rolled out. And then one of the 4 living creatures, which we saw again in Revelation 4 and 5, they're surrounding the throne, worshiping God, and they say, "Come," and invite for John to come and see, but also for the white horse to come out of the scroll then, the white horse with its rider. And you see a man on a white horse in Revelation coming out like this to conquer and conquer. You might think that it's Jesus. In fact, there are some that think that it's Jesus because in Revelation 19, which we'll get to in a few weeks, there is Jesus coming out on a white horse. But most commentators, though, most will believe that it's not Jesus. They actually, because of the differences, and this is the beauty of getting to know some Greek and looking at this. But Jesus is the one opening the scroll, so it wouldn't make sense for him to be riding the horse out. Number 2, the crown that's on this rider's head is a Stephanos crown, which is a victor's crown. It's a crown that's given or it's earned, it's received in that, whereas the crown in Revelation 19, I love this. Jesus' crown that he's wearing is a diadem, which is a royal crown. In fact, it says he doesn't just have one crown, he has many crowns. And he's got a sword, he doesn't have a bow. This here is likely an antichrist, a deceiver. And if we're looking at the outline from Matthew 24, that's what Jesus would say. There's going to be some who are going to come to deceive you. And so this one here is likely, and also mentioned in Daniel as well, one who's coming to proclaim a false peace, fake promises. He's getting the world to be duped by him, and he's deceiving them as he's coming out. And the conquering that he's receiving is through this false peace that he's had. So, in fact, some commentators even say he's got a bow, but he has no arrows. Well, what good is a bow without arrows, right? So he doesn't actually have a weapon. He just has the appearance of a weapon. And so he's giving this false sense of peace. And people are being duped by him because they're liking what he's saying. It's tickling their ears. Which is a healthy reminder for us that be careful what we listen to. Be able to line it up with what truth is. And so I believe that every one of these seals, there's kind of multiple layers to it. You've got the world reacting to it, and then you've got what about the Christians in this too? And I think for Christians, I think how we combat this is to be transformed by the renewing of our minds with the truth of Jesus Christ. That's how we can know the difference between what's being deceived, the deceiver, and what's right and true. And so let me encourage you to know Jesus. Jesus is the way, the truth, and the life. Right. And so you know Jesus and you're transformed by Jesus, you'll be able to tell the difference. So the first scroll, the white horse rider comes out. Then Jesus opened the second seal. I heard the second living creature say, "Come." And out came another horse, bright red is his color, and his rider was permitted to take peace from the earth so that people should slay one another. And he was given a great sword. We talking about wars and bloodshed and whatnot, that you'd think the bloodiest wars are in human history are from the most recent centuries. Just with modern warfare and just how horrific we can be. But that's not really the case. In fact, I was amazed and really saddened and grieved by humanity as you just do a search for death tolls in wars. In the Punic Wars, which was between Rome and others there, in 100 BC and 200 BC, it was kind of a stretch of about 100 years there. Estimated 1.5 million people were killed in that war. And you're like, what? They had that many people in the world back then? Yes, they did, and they died in this war. In China, a series of civil wars in the 2nd century AD, between 36 and 40 million people were killed. This is before modern warfare. This is just old school, having at it, killing one another in a war. In China, in around 700 AD, there was another war. 25 million people were killed. The Mongol conquest left more than 30 million people dead. And, in our more recent history, we got World War I killed 40 million, World War II killed 60 million. My gosh, there's a lot of bloodshed. The red horse rider of war, all he does is he removes peace from the earth and just let humans go at it. He's not even the one doing the destruction. He's just letting humans go at it. And this is nothing new under the sun, right? From the very beginning, humans rage with anger and hatred towards one another, from Cain and Abel all the way up into this moment now, and there's no exception. They're letting anger control them, hatred control them, and they just go at it. All the red horse rider needs to do is just pull peace away. The humans go at it. And we're pretty good at it. We've become very effective at killing one another. And as someone said, it's almost like, and again, there's multiple theories too. Is this talking about a future tense, or the scroll's opening up, or are we living in it? And as one person wrote in one of their theories, it's almost like we're letting the red horse rider run wild now with our sense of hatred and rage within us, that we just let it go. We don't have to wait for some future time. We've seen it, right? The great divide that we have in division, and the rage and the anger that we have for one another. But I'll tell you, the way that Christians can combat this, the faithful ones can combat this seal, And God is sovereign, he'll do what he's going to do. But I think one of the ways that the gift that God has given to us is the ability to forgive one another and to supernaturally love one another. That's the opposite of what the red horse is pulling. He pulls the peace back and we go at it. But Christians have been given a supernatural ability to love and to forgive one another, including our enemies, right? Including the jerks in our life, including people that are just not saying the things we like. And so given the ability to love one another. That's the red horse with pulling peace, and there's war. When verse 5, when he opened the third seal, I heard the third living creature say, "Come." And I looked, and behold, a black horse, and its rider had a pair of scales in its hands. And I heard what seemed to be a voice in the midst of the four living creatures saying, "A quart of wheat for a denarius, and 3 quarts of barley for a denarius, and do not harm the wine and the oil." I mean, there's a number of theories of what's going on here, but essentially he's saying, well, denarius is a day's wage. So take whatever you make in a whole day and go buy a piece of bread for it. That's essentially what he's getting at. You work the entire day for just enough bread for you to eat, not anyone else in your life. And so this is what happens. You've got the first horse deceives people. The second one comes in. There's war raging and hatred. And what quickly happens historically after wars is famine quickly follows and comes in, and inflation and so on. And so this is what they're starving. And these are, now there are parts in our world right now that are living in this, right in this. And there have been times in history where this has happened. And I know, like here's the elephant in the room. I hear complaining about the rising prices of what we need to pay for right now, gas and food and so on. But here's the reality. Nothing scares people. Nothing gets at the root of people's security more than when you take away their comfort. So many people find security in having just enough money and enough food to be able to live life comfortably the way that we want it. And God commands us, though, to be content. To be content with what we have and not be concerned about the things we don't have. And I grumble when I have to go fill my gas tank. But then I realize if we have more of a global perspective, this is not a problem. It is a first world problem is what it is. Right. God commands us to be content and to be generous in all circumstances. And the way to combat this too is that we can trust that God will provide everything that we need. If he loves the sparrows to feed them, won't he do the same for you because he loves you more? But this is a reality. When war ravishes, when people hate one another, it becomes bad. Living becomes hard. And that's what the rider on the black horse brings. And he opened the fourth seal, and I heard a voice of the fourth living creature say, "Come." And I looked, and behold, a pale horse. And its rider's name was Death, and Hades followed him. And they were given authority over a fourth of the earth to kill with the sword and famine of pestilence and wild beasts of the earth. I'm reading this, I can't help but get Johnny Cash's song out of my head. I just feel like if he could sing this when a man comes around, that's the song I'm referring to. It's just in my head. I hear his voice as he's reading these verses, and sorry, I don't have the Johnny Cash voice for you. But the pale horse, better translated, it's a yellowish green sickly color. It's like gangrene color, which makes sense. You got the white one deceiving, you got the red one of war, you got the black one, life is becoming hard, and famine, and then what happens next? Death comes. Death comes. The Greek word for death here is thanatos. Here's the way to remember it. Remember Thanos? The Greek name for his word means destruction, death. That's the name of the rider on this horse. Destruction and death is coming. Wars, lack of food, they lead to famine, disease brings death. And Hades, what it means there is, Hades is the underground, it's being buried. So death comes and then you get put in the ground. That's what's happening. It says a fourth of the earth. If it's a literal translation, well, right now we're at about 8 billion people in our population. A fourth would mean 2 billion would die when this happens. Just like that, 1 out of every 4. If it's a literal translation, but others would just say, you know what, this is just giving across the impression it's going to be bad. It's going to be really bad, and it's going to be worldwide. It's just the world is going to affect it. So in the first 4 seals of the 7, we've got the 4 horsemen. You get the 4 horsemen. You see it depicted in our popular culture. Here's some artwork depicting it. You can find it all over the place. I think, again, I mentioned Johnny Cash's song, When a Man Comes Around. You could also, recently it was X-Men Apocalypse. The 4 horsemen in that word, you remember them? Angel, Storm, Cyclops, and Magneto, and just being called. But the 4 horsemen are very popular in our culture, and it's been exampled all over the place because of this idea of apocalypse. Somebody's going to be ushering in the end times, and it's going to just be world catastrophe, and it's going to be bad. And what we get from the first 4, there's a distinction between the first 4 seals and the other ones, but the first 4, the distinction of the 4 horsemen reveal that life isn't easy for anyone in this. Life isn't easy for anyone. Everyone is suffering in that. Everyone is suffering. And it's a result of sin and sinful nature. It's God, it's part of God's plan. He's the one who owns the scroll, and Jesus is the one who's opening the scroll. But he's ultimately, if you look at it, it's just humans doing this thing to humans. It's our sinful nature having at it and fallen angels getting in the mix, bringing about our own destruction. And so when life isn't easy for anyone, everyone, it's part. And this is what it should come to us. C.S. Lewis writes, God whispers to us in our pleasures when we're comfortable. God whispers to us in that. He speaks to us in our conscience, but he shouts in our pains. The hope is with the 4 horsemen, however that's rolling out, whenever it is, if it's the future, if we're going through it right now, or if it already happened, that in the pains, we would hear God shouting, look at me, I'm a better option. I'm a better option than you choosing yourself in your own free will, in your sin, and letting it run rampant in itself. See me is what God is saying. See me. Look at me. I am your life. I am it. And that's what he's saying. So, we can apply this in our life that however the scroll, whatever tribulation, whatever trials, difficulty you're going through, will you see God in it? Will you see him? Will you trust in him? Will you keep your eyes on him? Will you focus on him? Because he is the author and perfecter of faith. He will get you. He's the living water. He is life to you. And lean in on him. Now, those are the first 4 seals. The 5th seal moves from earth to more heavenward. It gives us a glimpse of the heaven, and here we see it in verse 9. When he opened the 5th seal, I saw under the altar the souls of who had been slain for the word of God and for the witness they had borne. And then they cried out with a loud voice, O sovereign Lord, holy and true, how long before you judge and avenge our blood on those who dwell on the earth? Well, they were martyred for Jesus' sake. They're bearing the testimony of Jesus. They were killed for following Jesus. And here they are. They're in the throne, and they're under the altar, and they're pleading and they're praying with God. And then they were each given a white robe and told to rest a little longer till the number of their fellow servants and their brothers should be complete, who were to be killed as they themselves had been killed. So again, here it is. They're being killed because they're following Jesus. And Jesus tells us the world will hate us because the world hated him first. We know this. Why? We killed Jesus. We killed him. And here they are. They're in heaven. they gave their lives for Jesus. So here's what we know is that life isn't easy for the followers of Jesus. Surprise, it's not. Life isn't easy, period, right? But then when you say yes to Jesus, when you become a friend of God, when you are sealed with him and the Holy Spirit lives in you, the world just hates you all the more. Because we're a foreigner to this world. We weren't designed for this world. And this isn't our home. We'd have something that the world is longing for, looking for in something else, but just, yeah. So here are the saints, the martyrs, they're in heaven, they're asking, God, when is your judgment coming? When is it? He says, well, the time's not come yet. Heaven needs to be a little bit more crowded. More people need to say yes to Jesus, give their lives to Jesus. Now, there's some theories about when the rapture is. I'm going to get into this in a couple weeks. Was rapture in the Bible talks about the Christians being pulled up to heaven and avoiding the tribulation, or do they get pulled up in the tribulation or after the tribulation being this difficult season of time. And I think that these verses here give some indication that the rapture didn't happen yet because there's still the church being exampled on the earth in the midst of this tribulation. It says that heaven's not crowded yet. More need to be killed as a result of it. And I really firmly believe that you cannot remove the church. I know when you watch the Left Behind movie series and you see the Christians being pulled away and then people are becoming Christians without the Christians, I don't see that example in the Bible. Why? Because blessed are those who carry the gospel of peace in their shoes. And so the church has to be exampled in the midst of the world and able to share the good news. How will anyone believe unless they hear one another? So I think, now, and you can be a pre-trib rapture person, I get that, that's fine, you're entitled. But I believe that passages like this help to give some example that the church still exists in the midst of this trial. Christians will suffer. But you need not worry because he gives us everything that we need to be able to endure it. And if we are called to give our lives for Jesus, our reward is in heaven. We're given a white robe and we're given everything that we need. We're going to see that in a little bit as we get into chapter 7. But I want to be able to just say that right here, that regardless of what he calls us through, he always gives us what he needs. That there is the fifth seal. And then he opened the sixth seal. And I looked, and behold, and there was a great earthquake, and the sun became black as sackcloth, and the full moon became like blood, and the stars of the sky fell to the earth as the fig tree sheds its winter fruit when shaken by a gale. The sky vanished like a scroll that is rolled up. Oh, it's getting bad, isn't it? Well, there's more chapters in Revelation. I'm just letting you know. And every mountain and island was removed from its place. And the kings of the earth and the great ones and the generals and the rich and the powerful and everyone, slave and free, hid themselves in the caves and among the rocks of the mountains, calling on the rocks and the mountains, fall on us, hide us from the face of him who's seated on the throne and from the wrath of the Lamb, for the great day of their wrath has come, and who can stand? And who can stand? Here conveys the idea that anyone, no matter rich or poor, status in life, powerful or weak, anyone who is not for God is against God, and it's a very frightening place when God shows up. We know this, they try hiding from God because they know that they've been at war against it. They've been an enemy against God. They're hiding from God, just like Adam and Eve. Remember that way back in the garden? Adam and Eve, what did they do when they sinned? They hid from God. They hid from God. Just like when we do something wrong, when we sin, we're embarrassed when other people find out about it, right? We also want to hide it. We want to cover it up and hide it. And so it's an example. And they ask the question, when they're facing God, who can stand? Who can stand against God's might, his wrath, his strength, the holy God when he comes through? Who can stand? Our sin, it separates us from God in this. And he says, who can stand? Well, I love this. All right, you ready? Ready? Revelation chapter 7, verse 1. So that was the end of chapter 6. Here's 7, verse 1. The answer to the question, who can stand, is answered in this next chapter. They're asking the rhetorical question, I don't know if it's rhetorical. They're serious. Who can stand? God's wrath is coming against us. We got to hide. And here it is, verse 1. After this, I saw 4 angels, what? Standing. Who can stand? Well, the angels are standing, yeah? At the 4 corners of the earth, holding back the 4 winds of the earth, that no wind might blow in the earth or sea and against any tree. And we'll get into that. Again, there's more chapters in Revelation that'll help explain what that is. Those with God are standing with God. And then we don't have time to get into it as much, but then it lists, who's standing with God. These 144,000 people who have been sealed from every tribe of the sons of Israel. And it's not just, so again, in apocalyptic writing, numbers mean they're just a symbol. You don't have to take them literal. And so John is likely taking 12, which is a complete number, times 12, which is a complete number. What do you do when you take the square of 12? Math? What is the square of 12? 144 times a multitude, which is 1,000, 144,000. So you're taking a complete, and times a multitude. What we see here is, so not only the tribes of the people of Israel are being sealed, and then it continues with all nations in verse 9. In verse 9 it says, and this is one of my all-time favorite verses of the Bible and the depictions of heaven. This is it right here. A little trivia for like this. If you know it, Pastor Travis, one of his favorite verses. This is it, right? After this, I looked, and behold, a great multitude no one could number. We're not just talking about the people of Israel now at this point. He's saying a great multitude that no one could number. So a number 144,000. I thought he just numbered it. Nope, it was a symbol that nobody could number it. From every nation, all tribes, all peoples, all languages, doing what? Standing. Who can stand? Who can stand? Those who are for God, standing before the throne and before the Lamb, clothed in white robes with palm branches in their hands, crying out with a loud voice, salvation belongs to our God who sits on the throne and to the Lamb. Oh my gosh, I love this, right? Amen. Who can stand? Who can stand? It's Jesus. It's those who are with Jesus. Those who trust in Jesus and wear his righteousness. Righteousness is wearing his clean record. They're the ones standing. They're not standing on their own accord. They're standing because Jesus has washed them with the blood of the Lamb, forgiven their sins, put them in clean standing so they could be in the throne room around a holy God. And they're standing there. Now, I'm going to come back to this in just a minute, but I want to step aside because I don't want to skip over Revelation 7 and not talk about this part. Oh, my, I didn't even have coffee this morning. So, but I want to talk about that this multitude no one could count, all tribes, tongues, and nations. This is one of the reasons why we have a core value here at Valley Bricks is value every person. We value every person because in heaven there will be a representation from all tribes, tongues, and languages. Now, there are a number of theories out there in terms of when Jesus will come back. What needs to happen before he comes back? The one I firmly believe in, I'm really convicted in, and not just from this verse, but from others as well, that Jesus cannot come back, the end times cannot begin until every people group and language has had the opportunity to hear and receive the gospel message. Where do I get that from? Right here. All tribes, tongues, and nations are represented in heaven worshiping, standing before the throne. That's what we get. And so they all have to be, everyone at least has to be represented there, all right? An organization called the Joshua Project. Put up this map. The Joshua Project, you can go to the website, joshuaproject.net, and it surveys how many people groups, languages, and such there are in the world. They estimate there are 17,000 different unique people groups and languages and tribes around the world. And on this map, the ones that are green are those that have been significantly reached with the gospel. Those people groups, those languages, those tribes. The yellow are superficially reached. The red are the unreached. So if there's 17,000 in the world total, there are 7,000 people groups, tribes, tongues, nations that have not been reached with the gospel yet. Or 42% of our world 3.3 billion people have not had access to or received the gospel yet. This is heartbreaking. I had this moment. We were out at a REACH conference, which is our denomination. It was missions and an evangelism conference last week, and we were talking about this, and I was just humbled to think, what has the historic church been doing for the last 2,000 years? Didn't Jesus give us the commission to say, go and make disciples of all nations? But then somewhere along the way, the church historically went off kilter, spending a lot of time, money, and energy chasing other endeavors, even fighting holy wars instead of making disciples of all nations. Like, we could be there already if we would just do it. And I was broken by that. I felt like I needed to confess on behalf of the historic church to say, I'm sorry, God, we did not do what you told us to do. I am sorry. And we've been chasing our own things rather than seeing the furthest parts of the world with all tribes, tongues, and nations meet, know, and follow Jesus and know his life-changing love and give them the commission that Jesus gave, that they would go and share the life-changing love with others. But I hope, and that's why I love being part of Converge. That's part of their mission statements. They want to see a movement of God amongst all peoples, that unreached people groups will be met with the gospel in our generation. And I believe, I want to do something about that in our generation. I want Jesus to come back. I want him to come back. I want him to come back sooner than later, but I want heaven to be crowded in that process. I want heaven to be crowded. By the way, I don't have my phone on me, but if you download the Joshua Project app, each day you can look at an unreached people group and pray for them. It'll tell you who they are and how you can be praying. It'll show a picture of that tribe. It'll say what their language is, and you can be praying for it. So if you go to the App Store on your phone, go to the Joshua Project app, and you can do that. Here in Revelation 7, we get a glimpse of heaven as it is, and of those who have trusted Jesus before the throne. And now they suffered greatly in this life, but then they're standing with God. They're comforted. They're clothed in white robes there. And for the Lamb is in their midst. Of the throne will be their shepherd. He'll guide them to the springs of living water. Living water becomes a theme throughout Revelation. We're going to begin to see more of that. Remember, Jesus said, I offer the woman at the well, I offer you living water, right? You'll not thirst. And God will wipe away every tear from their eyes. This life was hard and difficult as they're following Jesus, but the next is not. They have a great reward. The seventh seal, which is found in Revelation 8, verse 1, ultimately leads into the seven trumpets, which we're going to cover next week. And I'm just going to read here. The Lamb opened the seventh seal, and there was a silence in heaven for about half an hour. There was a gasp in heaven, like, oh, what's happening? We'll get into that a little bit more. But one of the parts that this reminder here that before the altar, the angels there are serving God, and they're given much incense to offer with the prayers of the saints. This is a reminder. Tim said it last week as well. Do you remember, like, when you pray to God, that your prayers are being heard and they're being recorded and they're being dropped in the golden bowls in heaven? They're being offered up as worship. And so pray. How incredible is that, right? Your prayers matter to God. As I kind of land this thing here, now when we're looking at Revelation, we may be way more interested in the when and the how. When is this going to happen? How is it going to happen in Revelation? But it's really important, and I want us to keep looking at who and the why. Who is it happening to? Who's doing the actions? And why is it happening? You know, God spoke his word into existence. He spoke the world into existence in Genesis 1 and 2. He ended each day with a phrase. He'd always say, and it was good. And in fact, on the day that he made mankind, he said it was very good. And you know, why are we at this point in Revelation? That's what I'm getting at, is that in the beginning, when God said it was all good, And he put Adam and Eve in charge of the garden. He says, you got everything that you need right now. You got a relationship with me, and everything in the garden is taken care of. It's good. It's very good in that. But Adam and Eve found that they weren't content with that. They wanted something more than God and what God had provided for them. They saw something else. And so they didn't see it as good. They saw it as incomplete. And so they chased after their own. And so the failure of our first parents, which has been handed down to us ever since, is that we've not been content with God. Why is this happening in Revelation? Because mankind and humans have not been content with God and have not made God their God, and have not made God their king, not found him to be good. And so we chase our other things, and God just says, okay, I'll let you have that then. You will not find anything good outside of me. Go ahead and try. And then there comes a day when the holy God needs to come and bring judgment to that and say, enough is enough. Enough is enough. And the appeal for God, though, I hope you hear this in this, the appeal for God is, come to me. I've given you an opportunity. All tribes, tongues, and nations should have opportunity for the gospel to receive him. You've got, and if they don't have the gospel, then even creation is screaming out to you, I exist. You can have something more than what you're going after. But instead, we can't keep chasing illusions of what will bring us pleasure. We follow illusions of what we think will bring us freedom in our own will, in our own greed, our own lust, our own pride. You look at any sins that you commit, that's what it is. You're finding God's not good enough, and what God has given to you is not good enough, so you think you need to go do it yourself. That's what sin ultimately is. We're living in our own kingdom. Well, God's saying, but there's my kingdom. That's very good. And make an appeal to you, come to be part of my kingdom. And when you follow me, when you trust in my son, Jesus Christ, and you follow me and you become part of my kingdom, life on earth might be hard, and you may suffer and endure great, you may even die for it, but my kingdom is going to be good. And there's a place where we'll be standing with God before his throne. Jesus' invitation is to come and be part of his kingdom. To have salvation in God is to admit our need for him, trading in our treason against God for our sin, our citizenship in our own kingdom, in the kingdom of this world, and believing that Jesus died to purchase us, that we would be citizens of his kingdom. That's what salvation is. That's what Christianity is about. That's what following Jesus is all about. And as we turn our lives from the way that we're doing things and turn them towards God, we become friends of God. We become family members of God. We get to stand with God in that. That's the appeal to us in this. And I hope that you hear it. I'm pleading. I hope that you hear that. That's what it means to be a Christian. And no matter what we face in life or in the end times, if we get to see him, God gives us what we need to endure through it. Always, 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 always. But there are those who are defiantly standing against God who can stand, and those who, by the grace of God, get to stand with God. And so the question I'm going to leave at the end here is, will you stand with God or will you stand against him? That's what I think is Revelation is spelling out here. Will you stand with God? Will you surrender your life? Will you trust in him? Will you be part of his kingdom? Or the question gets lent, who can stand against him? Who can even stand?
Thank you for joining us today. Let's stay connected. Make sure to download our Valley Brook app or check out our website for more information about our upcoming events, kids ministry, serving opportunities, and more. Also, make sure to hit join or subscribe to our online platforms to stay up to date with what's happening at Valley Brook and to join us in our mission to know and share the life-changing love of God.